this is Tony.
This is Paul coming at you from the Friends for Life podcast.
And we're go.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Friends for Life podcast. Today, our special guest is Ben Drew from Open Future Learning. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Friends for Life podcast.
Hello,
we are
hello.
here with Mr. Ben Drew today of Open Future Learning. This is our first streaming podcast over the web, so we're glad that you're our first guest, Ben, on our streaming, and we're very excited to have you on. So how are things going out there in New York?
Things are good, Paul. Things are good. Strange times, but I'm good, and thank you, Tony and Paul, for having me on the podcast.
Awesome. How's COVID treating you? I know it's kind of rough, especially out east. It's more affecting than it is out here where we're at in Ohio.
Scary.
Yeah, right now the numbers are pretty low in New York, so we'll be
That's
thankful
good.
for that. The kids, supposedly are going back to school next week. We'll wait and see for how long. But yeah, I mean it's been a strange time, but you got to make the most of a bad situation. So, being around my kids a lot more, which I'm really grateful for. I'm around them quite a bit anyway. But
I'm about to say, at least that makes one of us.
yeah. So more than usual. And yeah, we've just been making the most of family time and trying to, it's been nice actually. We've kind of hung out a lot and just done stuff together. And so.
What's your favorite COVID thing to do? Or I guess not COVID, quarantine thing to do?
Good question. For me, my life hasn't changed that much. I'm really fortunate in what I do for work. It hasn't really impacted it that much. So the things that I love to do, I like to go mountain biking.
Oh, nice.
Me too.
See, that's a Paul thing right there.
We're connecting. So that's what I love to do, and that hasn't changed. Initially during the first few months of COVID, there was a lot more people on the trails, people riding the wrong way with no helmet.
Never done it before.
Stuff like that. But now you go, and they've all given up on it now, and it's back to how it was. And when you're alone in the woods, and it's great. It just takes you don't think about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It just takes your mind off everything, and you just become kind of at one with your bike, and just that's what
I know that feeling. So obviously you are not from America. How did you get over here, and how did you start Open Future Learning? How did that process happen? Because that's a very interesting story, because for Americans, a lot of stuff that we deal with is like all America, and obviously, you are not from here, so you probably have a different perspective on it. But what's it like coming over to the U.S. and having your own business, and what does that feel like to you?
Yeah, it was a dream for a long time to come over here, and then I got over here, and I thought actually not so bad back in the UK. But I'd worked on a summer camp over here back in '95, and for kids who had disabilities, and so that was my kind of initial experience. And then I actually came and worked in Boston. I had a work contract there. I was there for about 3 years, met my wife. We actually ended up living in the UK together for about 6 years.
Nice.
Then the long-term plan was to come back to New York. So that's kind of how I ended up back over here. This is where she was from originally. So that was the plan. And Open Future, I've worked in the field of developmental disabilities for about 25 years now. And Open Future really came out of when I first came to New York. One thing that really struck me was and this is shortly after getting here, I met with a family on the Upper East Side in the city. And I remember really vividly coming into the city, coming in, Penn Station, that whole area with the lights. And then I thought, I'm just going to walk up through, because this is, great. It was like a summertime in the evening. And I walked up there and I went through Times Square with all the lights. And I'm kind of, somehow within me, I was thinking this is going to be a cool new experience, meeting with this family. And I go and meet with them, and everything they said, everything they wanted for their kid, everything their kid wanted from his life was exactly the same as in general principles of everyone I'd ever worked with before in rural Devon in England.
Yeah.
So, and that's when it struck me, we're all trying to pretty much, everybody's, dreams and needs and wants and desires are unique to them. But for the most part,
Right.
we're all wanting and needing this very similar things in life. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. And I guess that was a little bit of a light bulb moment in terms of Open Future, because it made me think, well, in terms of training, there's the opportunity to create a resource that could be used in different countries and have, although it could be very, and this is what it is, Open Future Learning is a resource, online training resource that's 100% dedicated to the field of developmental disabilities, while at the same time being very generic in the sense that it could be used anywhere in the world, pretty much. And it would serve the needs of those people.
Ben, dude, I just want to elaborate on that so much, because the goal for Friends for Life is to not have a thought process when it comes to our population as a whole. What I mean by that is, like, there shouldn't be this is a normal person and this is not a normal person. That if the same training that people at McDonald's can learn in customer service, or Chick-fil-A, let's use Chick-fil-A because they have awesome customer service. I think everybody can agree with that. That same training can be utilized, in a sense, in our field of work. And I think it was very intelligent of you and awesome way to put it together the way that you have. And just in the event of how we even came across each other, or, I came across you through LinkedIn. I think you have some of the best memes that you put out there, some of the most thought-provoking ones for our community of people and our community of staff who should, we really need to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
So I take my hat off to you.
Thank you. That's it, just talking and getting people, that's why I really respect what you're doing here, putting content out. That's, content is king, isn't it?
Yes.
That's what I'm all about, is really just getting as much content out there as I can and really sharing our message. And, much more than that. So, ultimately coming back to that point, like you just said, just getting people talking, getting those conversations going. I think that's a really critical piece of what great organizations do, is really just talking about what you're doing, how you're doing it, getting the debates, the discussions. That's, what I've always loved when I worked within organizations. And this isn't true for all organizations, but the organizations where you could really debate stuff, where you could say, hey, I'm not sure about what we're doing here.
Yeah. Are we making a difference? Are we making a change? Are we giving, one of your memes that I saw, it was about the person-centered planning. But the person-centered planning was basically the same as everyone else's. Like, how can all 3 or 4 individuals in one place have the same, person-centered plan? It struck a chord with me that I went and I talked to my supervisors immediately. Like, hey, we need to start looking through our ISPs, which, here in Ohio, we call them ISPs, which are individual service plans. But, the same plans that you're used to dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big thing. And the words we use around that is another one. I remember when I used to run an support organization in Bristol in the UK, and you would go and meet with a family and with somebody who was looking for a service and a kind of provider to help them with their life. And, you'd just be so hesitant about using any of those words, because you knew that every other person that was going to meet with them was going to use all of the same words.
Right.
And not necessarily mean the same thing. So it's intention, isn't it? It's not necessarily the words that you use, but it's the intention and what you're actually going to do with those, what those words actually mean to you and how you actually represent them within your organization. We can all say person-centered planning.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, I mean, it's just that it gets me when you hear these organizations and they say stuff like, we are a person-centered planning organization. What? What do you mean? Like, what does that even mean?
I can say from the outside, you guys have a bunch of words or phrases and acronyms that I'm like, I have no idea what that means. But since working for Tony as a social media director, it's kind of crazy because let's step back a little bit, Ben, with you. He basically said, follow this guy and do what he does. That's what he told me. so you're like the inspiration for what we're doing out here. And I've learned a ton on from myself, because Tony, like, coming in from the outside, my background is in like video, audio, all this technical stuff and podcasting and things like this. So I came in here, I have no experience with anyone with disabilities. My grandma worked at a place with disabilities, and I have like memories as a child of just being terrified. She'd take me to work with her, and I'm like, there's like people coming up and trying to touch me because I'm a little kid, and like, oh, he's so cute. And the main thing that Tony told me, he's like, don't be weird. Just treat them like they're a normal person. Don't slow down. Don't just be like it's a normal person. And that, to me, that's really impactful because it just changed my whole outlook. So what you guys are doing is super important. I think, like you said earlier, people are kind of afraid to discuss anything with disabilities because it's kind of like they're treading on thin ice, they feel like. So what's both of your opinions on making this conversation easier to have for everyone, because most people don't deal with this. It's not something everyone's dealing with all the time.
Yeah, I think we've just got to start having that conversation. Like, if you work in this disability industry field, what it is, no real good word for it, but if you work in this sector, there's another not very good word. But if you're involved in the lives of people who have disabilities, I think you've got to talk about what you do and share what you do. And, when you see friends and they are using the word retard or whatever, not necessarily like correct them and pull them up on it, but just talk about it with them, explain what that means to people who you support. Talk about your work, what you do, what's great about it, what you love about it, and share that. And I think we can all just start, with ourselves and with our friends and with our family, and just share stories and what we do. And I think that's as good a place as any for any kind of change, isn't it? You think, look at what's going on in the world today. We've all just got to be accountable to ourselves and then do what we can do.
And I agree with Ben on that. Like, it's it's the small things that make it done in the long run. You want the first time that your kid, and I've elaborated on this before in other podcasts, but when you have a small child and they see a wheelchair for the first time, get them comfortable with them seeing that wheelchair, understanding what that wheelchair is for. And not only do I think that helps for your child to be grateful that they don't have to be in a wheelchair, but it also gives them the encouragement to say, well, I'm not scared to go up to this person and speak to them. It's not easy for every 5-6-year-old to see someone in a big machine that can run them over and hurt them. So their nervousness comes from a sense of ignorance. And I mean that completely in the word of definition wise, just not knowing. Most kids and most of my children, after being taught and given the opportunity, they want to now hop on all of the individuals we serve's wheelchair and say, hey, go as fast as you can. And it's like, okay, like that's fun, but let's not go that far.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's all like, everything's relative. It's all about perspective, what you're around, what you see. That shapes, how you think and feel about things. So if you, I know we talked about this the other day, but like if like when I was growing up, I was really fortunate that a friend of mine, he lived in this sort of community of houses for people with disabilities, and he was my best friend, and I would go and hang out at his house.
Mm-hmm.
And his parents helped kind of manage this little community, as it were, and
Nice.
of people who had developmental disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just hanging out with these guys, and it was great because whenever we wanted to play soccer, what we call football in England, all these guys were there, and they were always up for a game of soccer. So we didn't need to go and find other friends. But I got to know these guys on first-hand basis, and what they're, a little bit about who they were as people and their disability, and just it wasn't anything.
Mm-hmm.
It was never a step up for me or a sort of a process of. It wasn't, no thought went into it, I was just a kid. But then what I would see is they would come into the village or the town where I lived, which was a very small town, like in rural Devon, and other people in the community, including my friends who didn't know them, who hadn't spent any time around them, would respond differently to them. I saw them getting called names and sort of bullied a little bit, and people sort of moving out of their way and talking behind their backs and things. And that really struck a chord with me because I knew them, and they were sort of friends of mine who I'd hung out with, even just as a kid. So, that tells you a lot right there. It's just a lot of times, and that's what, going back to how can you make a difference within the people, your friends and wider society. A lot of people just don't understand, and that's why they're scared they don't want to put a foot out of place necessarily, and they don't understand what a developmental disability is and what it is.
You have really hit the nail on the head. I grew up with my uncle, and anyone who follows us through social media, I'm sure they have heard of my Uncle Larry. He is the reason why I do what I do, and it's because we're the tightest. We watched wrestling together. We played basketball, bowling. Everything he did, I did. We did it together, and it wasn't until my first physical altercation with somebody for making fun of him that I really understood the impact that people who with negative thoughts have on the population. But to not even go down that route, I think all of us in this field have been impacted by somebody close to us in just those same kind of moments that you're speaking of, from playing, what we call American soccer. But, going from playing sports to having just those moments of interaction to, speaking to one another. That's awesome.
Yeah, and Ben, you said you had some stories that were really impactful to you growing up that kind of brought you to this field. You just kind of talked about a little bit of your background, but why don't you give us a little more of your background in what brought you into the field, developmental disabilities, and kind of how you created your business from there, and any mishaps you may have had along the way.
Yeah, give me some tips, man.
So that experience, that was the kind of the story that led me into working in this field, was through my best friend and his family in this community, seeing all of that. And just to underline, if now those people, they actually end up closing down that community of houses. It was on the outskirts of the town or village. It was no bad thing, because then those people needed homes and houses, and they moved,
right,
and they became part of the town because they all got their own apartment or shared a house, or did what they all just kind of just scattered around the town now. So now those people, it's nothing when they're around the town. Now I've gone back and I still know some of those people, and it's a completely different experience. So they're going up and just doing the shopping on their own rather than with 15 other people.
That's good.
And not that there's, I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and say, well, people shouldn't live with other people with developmental disabilities, or they absolutely have to live in their own home. I really strongly believe in choice. But ultimately, the reason that they had a difficult experience when they came into the town is because they were very rarely in the town, unlike everybody else.
Right.
Plus, they all came in together, kind of unceremoniously. And it's a little bit like, oh my gosh, here's the huge minivan, and it's all the people from the...
We are experiencing technical difficulties.
Why people interacted with them differently is because they were never in the town, even though they were very close to it. They were, they were segregated in this community, and even though that's not great in some ways, there's other people who lived on the outskirts of the town, like the farmer and different people, and you knew who they were because they were in the town. Exactly. But they very rarely came in. Then when they came in with the big minivan bus thing, and everybody gets out, and then it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And ultimately, my point was that's why people treated them differently, because they didn't know them, they didn't understand them, they weren't there often enough. It comes back to that. It's the things that we work on now with people. Like we try to help people with is, be present in your community, be a member, show up, be there over and over again in the same places, bring your gifts, bring your talents, bring yourself, who you are, and contribute. And that's all the stuff that's really powerful, and they just weren't doing that. They weren't being supported to do that. And now, basically, and very often, one thing I've really found through my years of working in the field is just where the actual physical location of where you are can make the environment, the home, the place where you live, that can make such a massive difference to somebody's life.
Right.
And as an example of this, going off on a tangent a little, but we used to work with this lady a long time ago, and she lived on the top. This is in a city, but she lived on almost the top floor. It might have been the top floor of an apartment block.
Not like a penthouse or anything?
Not a penthouse, no. Think more like kind of the projects.
Okay. I got you.
Anybody who ever referred to it as the penthouse. Although we should have. So she, when we were first referred to sort of start working with her, and we met her and agreed that we would work with her and help her. One of the things that had been going on in her life for a while was she would throw things out of the top floor apartment, which is pretty dangerous because, if an iron lands on your head from 12 stories up, it's not going to be good, And people have been working with her for a long time, and things hadn't got better. So as kind of sometimes happens in our work, different people rotate in and out, and then it was our turn. And one of the things we learned early on, just through literally just getting to know somebody and talking and listening to them, was one of the things that she was upset about was that her mum lived on the other side of town.
Okay.
And she was a long way away from her mum, and her mum also lived around, there was other family around where her mum lived, and she was it was a good enough distance that it was a problem for her. And she mentioned that enough times that we were like, well, maybe we should help her move closer to her mum, where there weren't any high-rise apartments, buildings, and we could kill two birds with one stone.
Right.
But ultimately, obviously, the issue was that she was not any near her family. And that's why she was throwing things out of the window. When she moved, so much in her life changed for the better. And it was just physically changing the location of where she was, the different house, different home.
Right.
And that was the thing that made the massive difference in her life. And it just seems so, it's funny, like I tell my kids these stories and they're like, Dad, this is so obvious.
Kids are like that, man. They always point out the most obvious thing. You're like, how did I not see
that?
They're like, there's nothing special about this story at all. Your work's really straightforward. Like, what do people get stuck on? And I'm like, isn't it cool what we did for this person? And they're like, yeah, but it's kind of obvious, you know?
Yeah. Like, yeah, you should have did that a long time ago.
Like another example on the same housing thing, like I used to work with this guy and he lived in this big home with 22 other people.
Wow.
You can really even call it a home.
Yeah, that's like a frat house.
I've been there.
Yeah, right?
And he used to try and run away all the time. No one could figure out why he was running away. We had psychologists, social workers, all of us in the home. I couldn't figure it out. No one, we all think very highly of ourselves in our lives, don't we? But no one could figure it out. And this guy, it would often be on the coldest night. He'd be in his pajamas. The house was on the edge of a moor, which is just an open expanse of farmland. There were no hedges, no fences or anything. Miles and miles of moorland. And he would be off and we'd have to call Dartmoor Rescue and they'd get the helicopter out and it would be the middle of the night.
A whole helicopter? Wow. The resources there must be phenomenal. They wouldn't even send search dogs here. They would send our DSP.
That's how you value people's abilities in this country, maybe.
Man.
It's true.
So we would really fear for his life, that he would freeze to get death or something. He never did. We always managed to find him more. And sometimes it was a couple of days he would be gone for. And he had limited words. He didn't have many words in his sort of vocabulary. Anyway, the home came to closing and we helped this guy move. And his dad lived in Plymouth, which is some 15-20 minute drive away from where he was living.
Okay.
And he had kind of indicated he had enough words to sort of indicate what he wanted to do, and he wanted to live near his dad. Like when we had talked about that, he indicated pretty strongly that was something he would like. Yes, Plymouth. And all the professionals were like, oh gosh, major city, he's going to run away in the middle of the night, he's going to get run over by a car. Well, he moved. He never ran away again.
Never did.
Well, that's so crazy because I think 99% of the Earth's problem would be solved if you just listen to what people were telling you, actually listen at a core level. Yep. And that goes with pretty much anything. That's I think that's a basic trait. And like you said, with kids, they understand that. They're like, well, duh. Why didn't you think of that? I'm getting called out all the time by Tony's kids. They're like, well, duh, you should have thought of that. I'm like, well, yeah, I haven't.
And we kind of did everything. We, even for his own safety at one point, it's fitted with he had a tag, so we would be able to locate him easier. I remember even, and this is how, it's just so ridiculous to think back on it, but even they would look at the cycle of the moon and when it's a full moon and it's brighter out, maybe that's when he tries to run away. Maybe that, trying to sync all these and then doing, we call them ABC charts in the UK, but just kind of the antecedent and the behavior and what was the consequence and all this kind of stuff. Just crazy, and like you said, he never had enough words to be able to tell us I hate it here, or just maybe he did have the words, but he was never. Who knows? It just never was clear to us. But his behavior was his communication, clearly, and it's just so ridiculous that he was surrounded by very good people in a way. Even his family and his dad and everyone, but they were always kind of scratching their heads, and it's just. That was an example of just, again, you change somebody's environment changes and everything changes. And
just to elaborate on that, I feel the same way at times. I have behaviors. You have behaviors. Paul has behaviors. We have our situations in which
Yeah, I mean, if you viewed our lives through the lens of, I like to call it service land.
Mm-hmm.
You viewed our lives through the lens of service land, and if we had a file with everything that had gone on in our lives and things we'd done wrong, as service land would see them, and mistakes we'd made, and
I'd be in jail.
somebody with a disability can throw a glass against the wall, and it would be in their file for the rest of their life.
Thank you.
Like, I could have done that last night, and you will never know about it.
Right.
I might feel terrible about it for a week.
Yeah.
I'll get over it.
Uh-huh.
And then that's every person who meets that person. First thing you do before you meet them, just to get to know them a little, just go read the file. It's good practice, And you pick up that file and you're like, oh, who is this person? Like skilled enough to work with them, just put the glass against the wall, and what if that came at me, and all these thoughts going through your head. I've met people on paper before and thought, I'm not skilled enough to work with this person.
Yes.
Like, I've worked in this field for 15 years or whenever it was, and I've read the paperwork and I've thought, I don't have the skills. Like, I can't work with them. And then one thing leads to another, and you end up meeting them, and then you're like, what? Like, this is the loveliest person I've met. This guy's amazing. He's so endearing and charming, and then everything that you read is kind of, not to say that the file doesn't have like some value and worth, like it is an important, what we document, what we write is really important, and that kind of evidence is that even more so, but yeah.
You are 100% correct on that. I hate the black and white letters and paper to define someone. You hit the nail on the head 100%. I mean, all three of us would probably have a lot of questions to answer if we were held to the same standards as the individuals we serve. So I definitely love that. And honestly, that's going to help me segue into all of these wonderful modules you have. I mean, you guys have everything from autism to dementia, behaviors, or dealing with challenging behaviors. I love even the wording behind it on how you kind of express it to people, because there's so many things that can be used as a degrading tool, or so many ways that things can look degrading. But the approach that I've seen just from a lot of the modules you have, it's more of it's an approach of acceptance, and let's learn from it. And how do we learn best from that? So I even say all of that to say, how do you meet your trainers? How, do you go out there searching through different schools? What is your process to find a good trainer, and what do you look for that?
Yeah, initially when I was building the site, it was a case of people I knew really well, and that's one thing I've just been really fortunate of in my career is I met a couple of really incredible people quite early on, just by chance, and got to know them quite well, and they introduced me to other people. So you're working within this network of people who all think very similarly, a little bit like, if I jumped onto your Facebook page, everybody on there's probably got, for the most part, very similar ways of thinking and perspective on the world. And so that value base has always been embedded in me really strongly, just by these people who I've gotten to know early on, and who I've had mentors and people who I've really respected and been able to spend time with. So initially, I used those people, and they supported me and the ideas that I had and the development of the site. And then from there, it's a case of kind of listening to the people who are using the platform and thinking about what they want and need from it, and then occasionally just, my own ideas about what I think would be kind of fun to do and subjects that would be interesting to explore. And again, just using that network and trying to just gradually kind of pull outwards and go in different directions and different subject areas.
I think it's really important too, and that's something that Tony realized early on within the last, year or so. He's like, we need somebody in here that, we need to have an internet presence. And I think a lot of, not only in the disability field, but a lot of people are fighting that because they somehow think it's bad, and social media is just this, like, oh, Facebook's just a waste of time, and all you do is check your friends and what they posted, their food, and this and that. But, I mean, obviously you have a big online presence, you have a big LinkedIn presence, you have, a website. So how did you kind of get this idea to go online versus just offering, in-person trainings? Because that's a lot of what people do. Still, I think people aren't realizing the value of the internet, and especially in the field that's already kind of, I don't want to say like marginalized or smaller in some aspects. What was your inspiration to take this online, digital, high-quality video, high-quality audio, high-quality content? Where'd you get this inspiration?
Yeah. So, I guess initially, one of my early thoughts was that, back in the day, and hopefully this is something we've really changed, but it used to be the case that if you wanted to learn the kind of thinking of somebody like Beth Mount or Jack Pierpoint or Dave Hingsberger or Dave Petoniak, any of those people who are really, I kind of view them as like the gods of our field.
Right.
You want to learn from them, you would be very, very fortunate to get to spend time with them, because you would be one of the few that gets selected to go to the conference, or has the resources to do that yourself. And, I kind of remember back in the day, you'd be working at an organization and you'd hear about like rumblings of a conference, and well, we've got 3 places, and you would never be the person who got to go to it. Somebody would go and they'd come back and they'd be like, Dave Hingsberger's amazing. Oh my gosh, he's just blown my mind, changed the way I think about everything. And that always stuck with me, that the internet could change that. And then around the time that Open Future Learning was forming, was when video was really taking off. So that I thought, this is something we can really use to bring all these people's stories to a much wider audience and do it in a really financially efficient way. Now, at that time, and it's still the case now, really, online learning kind of had and still has a sort of a bad reputation. Just a book that you're flipping through the pages, and you're just like next, kind of reading the content, looking at the pictures or whatever. So it struck me that we could make something that was much richer in terms of the different medias that we use. And again, like I said before, dedicated to developmental disabilities, and really focus on, and storytelling is something that I've always really focused on. I remember finishing university and coming out and thinking to myself, well, I think I've got like 4 or 5 good stories out of that. Like, not much else, to struggle to really put down on paper what I've really...
We feel the same way.
Yeah.
But stories, from myself that I had experienced myself, and then stories that other people had told me that had just stayed with me, or they'd shared with me. So stories is a big thing, and it's just really a great way to connect with the audience, I think. So, and then since launching Open Future, like really just like head on tackling how people think about online learning and really just broadening that. So historically, people would think one person sat in front of a computer. We've really opened that up now. So you can use our site with groups of people. You can use what we call our side-by-side modules. So these are modules that you sit down alongside the person that you support and you both learn together. That's a huge thing. Always, historically, it would be the staff gets sent away, training. You come back and you either change the way you're doing something, or you help that person to learn about what you've learned. It's such a top-down approach. But side by side, you're both learning together, and you're just building that relationship as well. Then we have the audio modules. So like, some people will be listening to this, they could listen to our modules, and then you can do other things at the same time. So direct support staff who were feeding back to us and saying, hey, I love your content, but I don't have any spare time. I work 2-3 different jobs. I have a family. Well, now they can listen to our modules and complete them while they're, doing the laundry in the evening or traveling to work or whatever it might be. So that's something that's just kind of evolved along the way. And on each occasion that we've added something, another element to the site, it's really just kind of broadened, I hope, how people think about learning online.
And it's so awesome because I went through like all of the different modules, and I've seen how you guys have it structured, and it's kind of the no BS excuse. You can't give an excuse why you can't learn from these. I mean, you offer great packages. I think I think the first package starts between 2 staff members up to 24, and just
I'll tell you what I love right now. So it used to be like when we first launched, we had 10 modules, and when people would pull out, you always get people leave, like organizations, things change, you get it, like. But we'll always seek their feedback, like kind of exit interview, but it was trying to figure out like what is it? And initially it was like, well, there was some subject areas you didn't cover, so like we just like built more modules.
Yeah.
And then people were like, well, you have these long modules, but some of them are too long for our staff. So we launched what we call mini modules.
The mini ones, yes.
Now it's like, why are you leaving? What's going on?
How are you going to leave something that's 4 minutes long? Like,
somebody the other day was like, some of the modules were too long for us, so it wasn't quite the right fit for us. I'm like, but we got the mini modules that are half an hour less. So like, well, yeah, and then the other thing is just our staff don't have a lot of time. I'm like, well, we have the audio modules.
That's right. Leave zero excuses.
Well, that's something Tony and I talk about all the time. You can't make everybody happy. That's just how life is. Like, no matter how hard you try, there will always be somebody who doesn't like it. That's just part of the gig.
And it's so funny that you even say that, because it segues me to one of your modules that I actually found one of the, I think, most needed in at least our company. And it will be the reason why we will do business together and hopefully change the dynamic in the mindset. But it was the difficult families one. We do serve a lot of individuals. I can think of at least 15% of our revenue comes from individuals who are living with families or have close contact with certain families. And, I just watched the mini module of it, and I was like, well said. Sometimes we can sit and we can be in the office and we can explain things and say things, but it doesn't resonate the same way when you have authentic people speaking about authentic situations, mothers, fathers, and because sometimes even going into an individual's home, you might realize, and I'm playing devil's advocate right now, for some of our staffing, that these people have had a hard time, but they got a nice house. They ain't doing as bad as me. So I can be late. Let me make a relationship with them, and then I can take a lunch break sooner, but don't call the office and all of that. And I think that module helps understand, like, that parent is worrying about a whole lot already. That family member is worrying about a whole lot already. Why would we, or what gives us the right as a staff person or a DSP or anything to that nature to treat them as if like, I can halfway do my job and it makes sense.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story about that module. So that was something we spent a long time working on. That's probably 2 years of work producing that module. And the reason it started was there's this group here in New York City called The Moth, and they do these live open mic storytelling pieces where you can go and tell a story in the city, and if it's good and it hits the crowd in the right way, You know, they might give you a bigger platform to do it, and you might end up on their podcast. And it's your story has to be 6 minutes long, and they kind of create and support the development of people's stories through their platform and through their open mic nights. And they came to me and they were saying, you know, let's collaborate, let's do something together. Okay. And I had already been thinking about the idea of families. And I said, well, how about we get some families together? Okay. And we'll just see what comes out of it. And they have facilitators who will help people to tell their story. Okay. So we all meet. It's like a Saturday in New York City. We meet in their loft. And we had, I think it was about 7 or 8 families come. A couple of mums and dads, mostly mums. And I had sort of, these families had come to me from all sorts of different sources, but they hadn't been hand selected. It was just pretty much
just
like,
popped up.
would you be willing to be part of this? Yes, okay, come, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what happened. It was really fascinating. And the module, by the way, is called Difficult Families ?
Yes.
That question mark is really important. So
It is.
So they're coming, they're turning up, and most of us are there. And then this woman arrived, and she came in and sat down, and we were like, you know, hey, you know, so we're just meeting people for the first time. So I'm like, oh, who are you? You know, and she goes, oh yeah, hi, sorry, she's like, I'm Jennifer's mum. And we were like, well, I said, yeah, sorry, who are you? And she said, I'm Jennifer's mum. I'm like, yeah, but who are you? What's your name? You know? She's like, oh, everywhere I go, I'm Jennifer's mum. And we're like, this is really interesting. Okay, so I actually had imagined before this meeting, before that exchange, that what we would actually be doing was we'd get these parents to tell a story about their kids, and then in turn we would kind of develop those stories and build them into the module, okay? And what the facilitator, the guy who was helping out that day, did was he was like, hold on, we should take this. He's like, and instead of you all telling the story of your kids, because clearly that's all you ever do, it's quite insightful, you know? And that is true. If you're a parent and you have a child with a disability, you get really good at telling their story.
Yeah.
Every professional you meet, it's a battle for services and supports, and to get your child listened to and supported and cared for in the right way, and you tell their story over and over again, you become really, really good at doing that. And they will tell very powerful stories about their kids to engage you.
Definitely.
Fair enough. But behind those stories, that was what we wanted to get to. So this facilitator said, let's do this. I want each of you to shape and develop and work on a 6-minute story about yourselves. Okay? And these parents were like, oh, I've never done that. I can't talk about my kid because I've never, and it was really touching. Like someone got really emotional about it. They had never told their story.
Yeah.
And I tell you, like, I'm not a crier. Like, I'm from England. You do not cry if you're from England.
Same in America.
Yeah. If you're a guy and you cry, it's a problem.
In England, it's the upper lip in England. Like, you never cry. And I was in tears like several weeks in a row.
Oh man!
Like, just hit me so emotionally. And I'm not somebody who gets like cut up. I've heard lots of different people's stories over time, and like incredibly powerful stories from these parents are their story. You know, nothing really to do with their kid.
Right.
Always. Like, some of them are completely unrelated to their kids. But when you heard their story, it completely changed how you thought about their kid, and even without meeting that kid. Their story was just, if not more powerful than the story that they were telling about their kid.
Right.
So that's what that module, that's the majority of the module is, there's, you know, various bits and pieces to it, but running through it are the stories of these parents. And that's the big takeaway, I think, from that module is you're working with somebody, you're also working with their family. And in that case, you need to have, even if those family members aren't telling you their story, you've got to have the perspective to know that they have a story. They have had a life and quite a, you know, sometimes quite difficult and impactful life because of the fact that they've had a child with a disability, and just take a step back and really think about that. And actually, one of the really powerful things that came out of it was one parent had told me, and I've shared this before on social media, but she had said to me that one of the best workers that she had had, he said every time this guy turned up, he would be just so positive and present with our kid, and what that worker would do. And she asked him one day, like, how do you do it? You know, I know you've got difficult stuff going on in your life. And she had talked personally with him about his own challenges, you know, things that were going on in his world. She's like, when you're with my child, you're always so positive and present. She said, how do you do that? And he said, well, there's 7 steps up to your apartment, and I take each step one at a time. And on each step, I say to myself, right now you're just going to put aside everything that's going on, and you're going to focus on doing your job and being present with the person you're supporting. Or I'm actually not, I can't remember word for word, but something along those lines. And then ring the doorbell, and then just present and ready to do your job and support that person. And that is kind of, that's a really powerful piece. But so that module
that's great.
was a lot of work.
I think I'm glad you realized that, and Tony realized that, and he invested in not only his business but me. I think in the field in particular, not just this field, any field, is a lot of people don't want to invest in creatives. Like you were saying, the guy said, he said, oh my gosh, this is a whole different story than kind of what you were approaching it as. And like, I think storytelling is so important no matter what you're doing, whether you're in finance, whether you're into geology. I don't think it matters. I think storytelling is super important because as human beings, that's what we like.
Yes.
You go to a bar and you meet somebody, you hear their story. You go on an airplane, you sit next to somebody, you hear their story. And that's what connects people.
I'll take it back even further. You go to ancient Egypt. You know, everything that's on the walls and in the tombs and stuff, it all tells a story. And I think right now, even though 2020 has been very difficult for us, in the past 5 to 7 years, I have seen a big change in what people are looking at in the DD field and in that world. And they're making the changes I think that we as people should make. We're being a little more open with how we interact with people versus being reserved on if you're thinking that you're going to offend somebody and scare them. I know tons of individuals that we serve that do things that I just don't do. I don't smoke cigarettes, so I will ask them to put out a cigarette just as I would another person, if they want to speak with me. But at the same time, I'm going to sit and play basketball with you the same way that I would, anybody else. We're going to play video games the same way. And that means I'm going to win. No, I'm just joking. Because I lose a lot. But I love the work that you're doing. I love the community that you're sharing, on a platform that is meant not only for business, but for people to connect. And I think that what you're doing is going to be one of those segues to be able to connect the field of work that we do into the mainstream of life, and not just a flop piece, and that's the thing. This has to be a cultural dynamic, and I think that you are one of the innovators in that, Ben, and I'm happy for it, man. I'm so happy for you, and I'm so proud of you for what you do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, lastly, before we get off, because we're close to our hour mark. You should probably never put all of that together at once. But
did you rehearse that?
I should have did it more. The last module I do want to talk about that actually means a lot to me, and this is actually one of the first times that I'm going to even mention and bring it up, but the diversity module. And it's a big deal for me because in the light of what's going on nationwide throughout the U.S., actually worldwide, I mean, the protests for BLM and everything else are continuing to grow. And personally, being an African American male that lives in the United States, I do feel as if action needs to be taken. But even aside from my personal beliefs with that, a lot of my number one goals are for my company and for my individuals. So I looked at this in a different light, just in the fact that this has been going on with our individuals, not just because they were developmental disabled, but also because of their skin color or ethnicity. And it's very difficult to have, it's already difficult to be a certain race at times in certain places, let alone to have a developmental disability. Can you give us a quick little insight on the diversity module and what are some of the topics that you cover, and, how are you trying to integrate that into more of your work?
Yeah, I guess the story on that one's kind of interesting. And, we talked about this a lot about the other day, but just being open to, and I guess this is a kind of a theme of the module, but I'm just talking here about the development of that module. Being open and vulnerable to your own mistakes and things that you could be better on. And, so I'll, put my hand up and say, like, I messed up on this module, like in the beginning. So, and partly, I'll tell you, like, I think originally I was trying to tick a box.
Gotcha.
Our members were coming to us. They were saying, hey, we would like you to do something on this. And when enough people say that, we really need to do something on it.
Yeah.
This is a while back, and so I thought, yeah, we should do something on that. But obviously in the back of my mind, they're pushing me, aren't they? Because they're saying, do this. And I'm thinking, well, and I think not consciously, but I think I was thinking, how do we just get this done? So I actually approached Dave Hingsberger, he's a pretty prolific writer.
Okay.
He's gay. He has a disability, and he's a prolific writer. So in my mind, I'm thinking this is a pretty good guy to write this because he deals with a lot of issues around diversity. And, he has worked with us on lots of things. And I went to him and was like, hey, would you like to work with us on this? He was very enthusiastic. I'm like, great, I've ticked a box. We're done. He's going to write this now, and then we'll do some video stuff with him, and it will all be good. And then he came back to me like a month or so later. By the time I'm thinking he probably would have done it by now. And he's like, I haven't done anything. He's like, I don't think I should write this module.
That's like Paul and I.
Yeah, that's like me when Tony asked me to do something a month later. You haven't done this yet? I'm like, I'll get it done today.
So he's like, I haven't, I'm feeling a little bit let down. And then he's like, well, I don't think I'm the right person to write it. Or if I do write it, I should only write a piece of it. And in my mind, I'm pretty sure I'm just thinking, oh, for goodness sakes, can we just get this done? These people asking for this for ages. And then I had to, you take that step back. Yeah. And you really think about, like, what am I doing here? I'm just trying to get this done. And that is not, I'm going to end up with something that I'm not happy with. And let's just listen to Dave about what he's saying here. And obviously what he was saying was, you can't just have a white guy write a module about diversity.
There you go.
We need to bring in more voices. And I got to tell you, we did it, and it was one of the most painful processes. The module took so long to do, and it was so difficult to coordinate because we had 4 different people write the module. which is a terrible idea. Like, it's the worst way to write something because it takes forever. No one's sure what anybody else is doing. You think you've agreed, you think you're good. Then, like, back to the thing, a month later, no one's done anything and they've all forgotten what they were supposed to be doing. So, like, it took forever to do. But ultimately, we split it up and we had Karen Harvey, who's a really incredible woman in our field. She wrote a piece on gender and diversity.
Nice.
We had Roger Ramsay, who is a guy who, and I don't want to mess this up for him, but he's a guy who I think he's of Indian descent.
Okay.
And
well, you did better than me because honestly I thought I was like a Russian last name, and I would have said it terribly.
And he's Russian, so we had that bit in there. That was got But then we had Charles, and he's a black gay man. So he had some really great things to contribute as well. So we had this incredibly diverse panel of people helping with the writing, and then we also had them film with the module. And I think that says everything you need to know about the module. Mm-hmm. It's just all of those different voices, all of those different thoughts, experiences, stories. And then just going back to what you said, just also being thoughtful of, the one thing we didn't have in there, which we normally do for most of our modules, is like the voice of somebody who has a developmental disability. So I guess that's the one kind of box we didn't take. Boxes. But we do spend some time in this module talking about what you just spoke about. There are people who have a developmental disability, and then they are also gay or maybe black or a woman. And those people have, that's just something else that we need to think about when we're supporting people and thinking about diversity. And, Karen's background as well is in trauma-informed care. So that's a really useful piece to have as well. So, and, I think almost everybody we support is most likely dealing with some trauma. Mm-hmm. From just living the life that they've lived.
And one of the things that I want to do, we'll leave some links. Anybody who's listening, please go to either our YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, any of those things. But there's a video out there, and then we'll get off this topic because I don't like to spend too much time on a whole lot of things that can be downers. And this situation can be a downer. But it is a conversation that needs to be had. So I'm glad, and I thank both of you gentlemen for even having the conversation and being, pro making people better. And I think that that's the biggest thing. If we can be better as people, we can get rid of all of this other hate, or at least throw it in a box somewhere and let them yell at each other there. But there was a situation that happened roughly, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. There was a African-American gentleman who was helping an individual afflicted by autism. And he had a behavior situation. And this gentleman laid down on the ground, arms spread, looking like a starfish. He was the worker, yelling to the police that he was trying to help the individual. The individual was sitting there calm at the moment, playing with like a toy car or a toy train. And out of nowhere, this aide was shot. He was laying on the ground, arms fully spread, legs fully spread, and he was shot. And he even said that he asked the officer, like, "Why did you shoot me?" And his answer was like, "I don't know." Like, that was the actual answer. Like, he didn't know. So I say all of that, and this isn't like anything that either one of you have to even speak on. It's more for the audience that we as higher ups, or people who do any DSP work, anybody who can give their time to doing this field of work, can be in danger and not even know it, just because of either the color of your skin or somebody having a bad day. Like that frightened me when I seen that, to go to work and work with some of the hardest individuals that we've had through the city of Toledo and even the state of Ohio. We have had individuals who we've had some of the largest waivers for and served, and it can lead to a deadly situation in the wrong space at the wrong time. So yeah, I just really needed to throw it out there because I think it is a common point that we need to recognize and be prepared for and think about.
Yeah, and it's a hard issue. I mean, I'm being a white guy. Tony and I talk about this all the time. Like, it's a hard issue to look in from the outside as a white person who rarely has to deal with any of this kind of stuff. So it's like, you know, it's really it's a complicated issue, and I don't think a lot of people understand how difficult it is for people that are not white to deal with this stuff, on top of, especially if you're someone with a disability, you already kind of have a people looking at you differently, and then if you're of any sort of color that's not white, it's a tough field. So at least you're addressing it. That's half the battle there, because a lot of people will not touch it. They don't talk about it. They don't deal with it. And it's frankly an awkward subject because nobody wants to talk about it. But the fact that you've addressed it at all is very important. And gender identity, all this stuff is very touchy subjects now. Yeah. And it always has been. But the fact that it's being brought up in the disability field is very important. And I don't think it should be a main talking point that we're always talking about all the time. But I mean, it is part of it.
Yeah.
And thank you for addressing it. Yeah. even bringing it out there,
Yeah. I think thinking about someone like yourself, Tony, like as a black man, and me as a white guy, like I could never know what it is like to walk in your shoes. Like, and I think that's the dangerous thing, is to kind of start thinking that you understand somebody else's perspective or know what they're going through and understand their daily kind of perspective on life and the experiences that they have. Like, I'm confident that I would never know, but at the same time, I think that for me, at least personally, it's just always challenging yourself to at least think about and be mindful of and be knowledgeable of some of the experiences
that's right
that people have been through and lived through, and educating yourself. So the same goes for the people that we support, whether they are black or disabled or gay or transgender or whatever it might be, just kind of being thoughtful and taking the time to educate yourself and talk to them about their experiences and taking time to learn from them about who they are, what's going on in their lives and what their thoughts are about that. But just at the same time, never being so presumptuous that you get to the point where you think, well, now I know.
Exactly. I think that could be said for anything, disability or not. I think we need more people thinking like that overall. But Ben, I want to thank you so much for coming on our humble podcast.
Thank you.
Before we go, if you just let the viewers know and the listeners know kind of where they can find you, your information, and any social media links you can have, and then we will let you get back to your normal life.
Thank you. So you can just Google. I mean, if you can't figure this out, you're in trouble. But you go onto Google, and here's what you do next. You type in Open Future Learning, okay?
Got it.
Hit return or enter, depending on what computer you're on. And then you're going to see all of our stuff there. But we're on Instagram, LinkedIn, you'll see our website, Facebook, and all those good places. But I would definitely say, if you're not already following us, follow us on social media, because the website is the sign on the business side of things, and then social media, we share a lot of the stuff that's going on through that, but we'll also share some fun stuff and thoughtful things and lots of other content there, so it's definitely worth a follow.
Well, definitely. Well, thank you, Ben, man. I'm so happy that you not only came on, but I really feel as if we're developing a relationship that will be able to help not only the individuals we serve, but the people that we're trying to teach. I really thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, and thanks for doing this, and really appreciate what you're doing, putting this content out there. It's a good thing. So, thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Later on, brother.
Thank you for watching the Friends for Life podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a like. Thanks, Ben, for joining our podcast today. Bye.